Okay, get those aprons ready, folks, because today we're cooking up something special. A little something I like to call history with a side of deliciousness. We're talking wine cookies.
Wine cookies.
You heard right. But these aren't just any cookies. These little bites are packed with ancient Greek history, and trust me, once you get a taste of this deep dive, you'll be saying, Opa.
Sounds intriguing. Where do we even begin with a recipe that bridges the gap between modern kitchens and ancient Greece?
Well, our journey starts with a YouTube video transcript from magiacookTv. But it's not just the recipe itself. It's the baker's commentary, the little insights they sprinkle in that really caught my eye.
Ah, those little nuggets of wisdom that make you go, I never thought about it that way before. I'm ready to dig in.
Me too. So let's start with the ingredient list, shall we? We've got our usual suspects, flour, sugar, the works. But then the baker drops this little gem about using high-quality olive oil.
Olive oil. Now that's an ingredient with some serious historical weight, especially in ancient Greece.
Oh, absolutely. And the baker even mentions how it adds this depth of flavor, like something fit for, well,
For the gods.
exactly.
Huh.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's break down why olive oil was so significant in ancient Greece.
Well, for starters, olive oil was far more than just a cooking ingredient back then. It was practically sacred. They used it for everything. Religious ceremonies, medicine, even fueling their lamps.
It's amazing how an ingredient can hold so much cultural significance, right? It's like a direct link to the past, a taste of history in every drop.
Absolutely. And speaking of ingredients with a story to tell, let's not forget the star of the show, the wine. I mean, you don't see wine in just any cookie recipe.
Right, and the baker specifically calls them spondo cookies.
Ah.
That's a spondo for our Greek scholars listening in. It's like they knew we were going on a deep dive.
They were practically begging for it. But in all seriousness, that word sponda, it's our first real clue that we're dealing with something more than just a tasty treat.
Okay, so what does spawn actually mean? Is it like a secret ingredient or something?
Not quite a secret ingredient, but definitely an essential one. Bana refers to libations, which were a fundamental part of ancient Greek religious practices.
Libations. Okay, now you're just using fancy words to make me hungry. What in the name of Zeus are libations?
Think of it this way. Imagine you're about to enjoy a delicious meal, but before you dig in, you offer a portion of your food and drink to the gods as a gesture of respect and gratitude. That's libation in a nutshell.
So it's like a thank you offering to the gods, a way to acknowledge their presence and, I don't know, maybe score some extra brownie points in the afterlife.
Something like that. But it wasn't just about the act of offering, it was about the choice of ingredients, the reverence with which it was done that imbued it with meaning.
So it's not like they were just pouring out any old thing and calling it a day.
Not at all. Each ingredient had its own symbolic significance, its own story to tell.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. And the baker specifically mentions that the key ingredients in these cookies, wine, honey, olive oil, they're all classic libation ingredients.
Exactly. It's almost as if this recipe is a modern-day echo of those ancient rituals, a way to connect with the past through the language of food.
I love that, a culinary time machine disguised as a cookie.
Precisely. And speaking of time machines, we haven't even scratched the surface of what these ingredients symbolize.
Well, hop in because this time machine is ready to roll. So we've got our time machine gassed up and ready to go. First stop, ancient Greece, land of myths, legends, and apparently some seriously symbolic ingredients.
Absolutely. And I'd say our first order of business is to unravel the mystery of honey in these spondo cookies. Because in ancient Greece, honey wasn't just a sweetener, it was practically a gift from the gods.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. What made honey so special to the ancient Greeks? Was it like imbued with magical powers or something?
Well, imagine a time before refined sugar when honey was the ultimate luxury, the epitome of sweetness. It represented abundance, fertility, and even held connections to immortality.
Wow, no wonder it was a top-tier offering for the gods. It's like the ancient Greek equivalent of a golden ticket to a good life, and maybe even a good afterlife.
You're not far off. Honey was often used to honor specific deities, particularly those associated with those themes. Think Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, or even the fates who controlled destiny.
It's incredible how a single ingredient can hold so much weight, so much meaning. It's like the baker is unknowingly tapping into this ancient network of beliefs just by adding a touch of honey to their cookies.
It's a subtle but powerful connection. Now, before we get too lost in the sweetness of honey, we can't forget about our other key ingredient, Olive oil. Remember how we were talking about it being practically sacred in ancient Greece?
Ah, yes, olive oil, the liquid gold that fueled their lamps, healed their wounds, and apparently made their cookies extra delicious. What other secrets does this ancient ingredient hold?
Well, beyond its practical uses, olive oil was also deeply symbolic. It represented purity, strength, even victory. Pretty impressive for something you can drizzle on a salad, right?
Victory. That's a new one. I never would have associated olive oil with winning, but now that you mention it, it kind of makes sense. Tell me more.
Think about the olive tree itself. It's incredibly resilient, able to withstand harsh weather conditions and even fires. And the oil, it has this remarkable ability to preserve and protect.
Right. It's like the ancient Greeks looked at the olive tree and saw this symbol of enduring strength, with the oil as its lifeblood, its essence.
Exactly. And this symbolism wasn't just limited to their myths and legends, it permeated their everyday lives. Athletes, for example, were often anointed with olive oil before competitions.
Oh, wow. Like a pre-game ritual for success. Instead of a power smoothie, it was an olive oil rubbed down ancient Greece's secret weapon. It really highlights how deeply their beliefs were woven into their relationship with nature and its bounty. Speaking of connections, the baker actually draws a parallel between these Spondo cookies and a famous scene in literature, Odysseus and his epic journey home in Homer's Odyssey.
Yes, Odysseus, the original poster child for it's about the journey, not the destination. But in all seriousness, it's a pivotal scene in the poem, one that underscores the significance of libations in ancient Greek culture.
So we're talking more than just a casual, hey gods, please help me out here kind of offering.
Oh, absolutely not. Odysseus finds himself stranded, desperate to return home after years of trials and tribulations. He carefully prepares a libation, selecting each ingredient with purpose. Wine, milk, honey, water, each element carrying symbolic weight, adding gravitas to his plea for divine intervention.
It's moments like these, when you realize that these ancient stories, these rituals, they still resonate with us today. Especially when we see their echoes in something as familiar and comforting as a cookie recipe.
It's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? We start with something that seems so simple, so commonplace, but as we peel back the layers, we uncover this intricate tapestry of cultural connections, historical echoes that link us to the past in unexpected ways.
And in this case, those echoes have led us straight to ancient Greece, all thanks to a humble cookie and its intriguing ingredients. It makes you wonder what other hidden connections are tucked away in our everyday lives, just waiting to be discovered.
It's like we're surrounded by these invisible threads, these echoes of the past, and sometimes all it takes is a simple cookie.
Or a deep dive.
Or a deep dive, exactly, to unravel those threads and reveal the stories they hold.
And speaking of stories, this deep dive has been quite the journey. We started with a simple recipe for wine cookies, and somehow we ended up in ancient Greece, rubbing shoulders with gods, goddesses, and epic heroes.
It's amazing what you can learn from a little flour, honey, and a dash of curiosity.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, right?
Yeah.
They remind us that history isn't just dates in a textbook. It's alive. It's all around us, even in our kitchens.
Absolutely. And it's up to us to keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep peeling back those layers to uncover the hidden connections that make our world so rich and fascinating.
So, as we savor the last crumbs of this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from our exploration of these Spondo cookies?
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway is this. The next time you find yourself reaching for a familiar recipe, take a moment to really look at the ingredients, not just as components of a dish, but as potential portals to the past.
Like little culinary time capsules. Who knew that flour and honey could be so historically loaded?
Right. Each ingredient has its own story to tell, its own journey through time. And by tracing those journeys, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the food we eat, the traditions we keep, and the connections we share with those who came before us.
It's like the saying goes, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And in this case, I'm definitely hungry for more.
Me too. There's always something new to discover, another layer to uncover. That's what makes these deep dives so exciting.
On that note, I think it's time for us to whip up a batch of these Spondo cookies. What do you say? A little taste of history, a sprinkle of ancient wisdom, and a whole lot of deliciousness.
Sounds like the perfect way to end our deep dive. Count me in.
All right, folks, until next time, happy baking, stay curious, and remember, there's always more to discover, one delicious deep dive at a time.